Welcome to Rambam In-Depth. Today we'll be discussing the Rambam in Hilchas Shar Avis HaTumeis Perek Tezayin Halacha Aleph. And the Rambam established previously that there's a difference between a private domain and a public domain with regard to impurity. Whenever there's a suffix, a doubt about whether a person is tamei that arises in a private domain, sveike tamei, we assume that the person is tamei. Whereas if the person's status, whether the person is tamei or not, was in a public domain, sveike tahar, the doubt remains tahar. The person remains ritually tahar. And the Rambam here explains the basis for this distinction. What is the reason the sages purified a doubt in a public domain? And the Rambam gives the following reason. When they would bring a carbon pesach, and the majority of the community was tamei, you would still bring the carbon pesach. It would override the needs of the community, of the rabbim, of the public, would override the tumah, the impurity, and you would bring the carbon pesach. So the Rambam makes a kal v'chomer. Im tumah vadois nidchis mipneim. If a certain impurity, but there's no question, there's no suffix, is suspended, is pushed away because of the public, kal v'chomer l'safek tumah. It goes without saying that if there's only a doubt if there's impurity, that the fact that it's berabim in public, that it should push it away. Then the Rambam says, why were they stringent when it's a doubt in a private domain? So the Rambam explains, because we have a halacha of a woman, a married woman, who's suspected of adultery, who was secluded with a strange man, and we have to assume, based on this doubt, that she's tamei. She's forbidden to her husband until it's verified by going to the Beis Hamikdash and drinking the special potion that would determine whether she's innocent or guilty. But meanwhile, she is considered tamei. She's forbidden to her husband. Alpha bishar davar suffik, even though it's only a doubt, there's no certainty. She is impure. She is forbidden to have relations with her husband until she drinks of the mayim, special bitter waters in the Beis Hamikdash. So here we see that in a private domain, because obviously the seclusion occurs in a private domain, the doubt is considered to be as if it was certain, and she's forbidden to her husband. So the commentaries ask a very simple question. Once we establish that a suffix tumah, b'shus hayachid, a doubtful impurity in a private domain is tamei because it's based on sota, why do we need another reason to say that suffix tumah b'shus harabim is tahar? If it's obvious, if it's not in the private domain like the sota, then the halacha is different. The fact that the Torah has to tell you by a sota that if there's a suffix, she's tamei, means that if it's not similar to the case of sota, it's not in a private domain, it's in a public domain, it would be tahar. So why do we need another reason for the fact that in a public domain, a suffix, a doubt, is tahar? So the Tosfos Yantif, commentary on the Mishnah, says that if there would have been only one source, the one of Saita, we wouldn't have distinguished between a suffix tumah in Rishus HaYachid and Rishus HaRabim. We would be machmer, we would be stringent in both cases. The fact that the Torah talks about a sota in a secluded place is because the Torah is talking about the common occurrence, that where would a person be secluded? It would be in a private domain. People would not do it in a public domain. So we wouldn't say that only in a private domain is a suffix tamei. We'd say that it extends even to a public domain as well. The fact that the Torah uses the example of a private domain is because that's the natural setting where this kind of thing would happen. That's why we need a special limud, a special source to tell us that a public domain, in fact, the suffix is tahar, based on that kal v'chomer. Reb Chaim Ozer, in his Sefer Achiezer, gives another difference. He says the difference between Rishus HaYachid and Rishus HaRabim is not an inherent difference, because in the case of sota, it's not as if that sota is a doubt in a private domain, but if it would happen in a public domain, it would be different. There is no such thing as a public domain with regard to sota, because you can't be secluded once you're in public. It's a contradiction in terms. If there's seclusion, it means it's in private. So by very definition, you cannot derive from Saita the Safek Tumah B'Shas Harabim as Torah, because we'd say there is no such thing as a Safek Tumah B'Shas Harabim with regard to Saita. That's why the Chachamim had to derive this halacha from Karban Pesach. There, the Torah is lenient even with a certain Tumah, Kal V'Chaimer, how much more so with a doubtful Tumah B'Shas Harabim.